Hello. Thank you for joining us this evening for our gifted support group. I just want to say thank you all for joining this evening. We are going to have a Q&A section as well as the chats open. So I want to give you a quick tutorial of Zoom, and then we'll go right into our event this evening. On the bar below your screen, you have an option for a Q&A and you have an option for chat. You can use either one of those to communicate with us. I'll be reviewing both of those throughout the evening, as well as Dr. Greenwood, who will be looking at the Q&A section as well. So feel free to reach out to us and ask us your questions. I am really excited to bring you tonight's guest. This is a gentleman that I met at a Bridges Academy conference here in Los Angeles. If you're not familiar with the Bridges Academy, it's a school in Laurel Canyon designed specifically for 2E students. 2E is twice exceptionality, as some of you might be aware of. It's where a student has giftedness as well as another learning challenge, perhaps, or a learning disability. And I was really excited to meet him. We've had multiple conversations, and it's been a long time coming to get here tonight. So I want to welcome Dr. Dan Greenwood. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. For those of you, again, out in the audience, to give you a little more context of IEA, we're a nonprofit located in Pasadena, and we're specifically designed to help students and families of students of gifted children. So tonight we're gonna talk with Dan about what he does within the community and with students. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber. Should we wait? I know traffic is sometimes an issue, and so we want to make sure people can find their way here. No, it's really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's a topic that I'm quite passionate about, and that, of course, is, let me go ahead and I'm going to commandeer the screen at this point. That's preparing young adults for for launching into a young adulthood and independence. And this is true for all kids. And so what I hope to do today is actually help frame the conversation, help you think about what needs to be thought of as you think about helping your child who is probably in school, living at home, and at some point they're going to graduate that comfortable existence and they're going to be headed into a transition. And we're going to be thinking about transition into what? And we know that there are a number of options out there after post-high school. There's now more than ever, and people are taking advantages of lots and lots of different avenues to pursue. But we believe at Greenwood Associates very strongly that they need to be transitioning towards something to inform their decisions about the path that they're about to take. So what we do is we think about it in terms of careers, long-term career objectives. And we're trying to get students to think about that in sophomore year and above. And that is going to help give them a direction and also helps them navigate this option, this labyrinth of options available to them, because different options may make more sense if they're headed towards one direction or another. Let me also just jump in here and say that I do want this to be a conversation. So if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A or put those in the chat, and I will try and be aware of them and answering questions. So please feel free to participate in this presentation. But back to the topic at hand. So what we think is incredibly important to help students transition and know what the next steps are in their evolution as an emerging young adult is to have a career direction. So now what I'm going to do is give you a primer on what is best practices for career counseling. And hopefully you'll be able to use this information as you begin to help your students, or if students are out there listening to this, they can be thinking about what does this mean for them and how does this pertain and how does it flesh itself out. We also do this career counseling privately. So I'm going to be going through what's known as the Greenwood System. And I'm going to be showing you resources that you can use apart from us in an attempt to do this. But you also have the ability to contract directly with us as well. So for career counseling, so their best practices show us after 100 years of research, and our system has been validated and in the Career Development Quarterly, a peer-reviewed journal. It begins with self-exploration. So these self-explorations is the student thinking about, you know, what are my abilities? What are my interests? What are my values? And what is my personality? We know from career counseling research that these are the 4 domains that are most important when helping a student direct their efforts towards one career or another. And where all of those domains overlap is where you find their passions and their career interests. And then after all of that has been explored, understood, and a clear sense of identity has been developed, then phase 2 is the career exploration. But let's unpack phase 1 a little bit more, this self-exploration. What do we mean by abilities? So abilities, everyone has certain strengths and everyone has certain deficits. And what we hope to do in career counseling is take those things that are strengths and leverage them. Find careers for which those strengths are particularly valued and for which the deficits that they may or may not have are insignificant or less significant. So we're looking at what their abilities are. We're looking at things like physical ability, cognitive ability, social skills, and even workplace preferences. We're also looking at how much education does the student want? Do they just want to get an associate's degree or maybe some certification? Are they interested in a bachelor's degree? And are they willing to go to master's and doctoral level education? So that's what we're talking about with abilities. We're really measuring and really calibrating what it is they're good at, what might their deficits be, and trying to leverage that, and then figuring out what degree of education is appropriate as well. Second thing we look at are the interests. And for interests in career counseling, we use John Holland's theory. And it's called the Holland theory. You may have heard of it referred to as RIASEC, R-I-A-S-E-C. In 1950s, John Holland at Johns Hopkins University realized that there were 6 types of people. And when those 6 types of people gather, they create 6 types of environments. And when those people in that environment, it becomes a virtuous cycle. People who feel comfortable in that environment are fed by that environment and they feel more fulfilled. And then they feed into the environment and they create more of an environment that's also accepting and celebratory of other people in that environment. And there are 6 different types, and those different types like to solve different problems and think about things in certain ways. And so he figured out, and we'll go through each of these individually, there's the realistics. So this is the R. They like to work with their hands, build things, and be outdoors. They are very thrifty. They like to be physical. They like to make things, sometimes work with tools, sometimes be out in nature or outdoors or working with animals. But there are also a lot of skilled labor that have R in them, like dentistry is very realistic because those people are making teeth and shaving things down. And so they're very hands-on. So are people in labs. They're very hands-on. They like to be standing and manipulating things. Then you have the I's. These are the investigatives. They like to solve problems, perform experiments, and conduct research. They're very intellectual. They like scholarship. They are very analytical, rational. They love observation and discovery and exploration. They're inquisitive. And they frequently like to get additional degrees. They like to solve information or solve problems through information, so they seek out additional information through academia in many cases. Then there are the artistics. These people are very creative. It doesn't mean that they're fine artists, although all the fine artists are the A's, but it does mean that they're nonconformist, they're creative, they're original. They like to think in abstraction. They like to express themselves, and they like to communicate as well. So those are the A's. Then you have the S, which is the helpers. These people are very kind and generous and empathetic, and they love to build relationships and help people. They're very socially oriented, very philanthropic. The E's are the enterprisers. They're very persuasive. They like to debate and compete, and they like to dominate and lead and motivate. They're very optimistic and energetic. They're good in politics and in law, but they are the leaders. And then the C's. The C's are the conventionals. They like to be very precise and accurate and detail-oriented. They like to model things through math. They like structure. They like hierarchy. So when you take the E's, which are the enterprisers, the persuaders, and you put them with C, the ECs are the business people. These people like to lead and debate and be involved in organizations that have hierarchy and structure and detail orientation, and use math to solve problems. So if you're wondering what you are, or have a student who's wondering what they are, mynextmove.org has down in the lower right-hand corner a Holland Code assessment. And so you can take a Holland Code assessment, and it will give you the degree you are these. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Amber. Amber's typing the things into the Zoom chat. I think you might be able to click on them, but I think I found out earlier you're not able to copy and paste them. So maybe you'll take screenshots of things that you want. And I understand this is also going to probably be captured and uploaded later, so you'll be able to scrub through it and find these things. So with that said, so that's the Holland Code. So we're very interested in identifying a student's degree to which they are each of the things in the 6 letters of the RIASEC, the Holland Code. Yes, it will be shared later. Very good. Thank you, Amber. The next thing we want to look at are values. And this is what's important to the students. And we're looking particularly at career values and thinking about, is it that they want to be creative, or they want to help people, or are they more interested in things like job security and regular hours? Are they more interested in fast-paced and wealth and to be known? How important is intellectual growth to them? Do they want to be their own boss? Do they want independence in the workplace? So these are things that they really need to think about. And ideally, they would come up with things that are essential to them. A list of essential things, and we would want them to articulate that. So time for family, what does that mean for you? What does it mean to be helpful to people? And then from that, when we work with clients, we have them actually develop purpose and passion synthesis statements. And this is after thinking about who they are and what they want and really burrowing into their values, we want them to express that in a way through sentence format. And you'll see later how we use these sentences to create a lens through which we look at the careers, and we can evaluate which careers satisfy these essential values. Now, it would be great if you found something that satisfies all your essential values, and that'd be the ideal, but sometimes you have to give and take a little bit from the essential values, but at least it's good for you to evaluate all the careers with respect to their ability to satisfy these different aspects of what you find important, what you value.
Dan, I have a quick question for you here.
Please.
This is for students who are in high school. I'm imagining sophomores and juniors are really the sweet spot to be examining these questions for themselves. For For that age group, these can be some really challenging questions to ask and some really hard answers to find. How do you encourage self-discovery for someone who doesn't really know themselves yet?
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it starts with a career sort. We present a values sort. So we have a list of career values, personal values, and then motivators. And so we're asking them to sort them into essential, very important, desirable, and not important. And you may be able to find a list of those out on the web. Some people sell flashcards that have different values on them, and you can do these kinds of value sorts. So it's easier when you present them with options, and then they make simple decisions about which one's higher, lower, middle, and not important. So that becomes the first kind of sort that they do. They think about it, they put them in priority order, then you have them articulate. What does that mean? You said that this was essential. Think about what that means. Tell me what that means. Then you can write sentences based on what they've said. But the whole process of career counseling, it's best if you don't just sit them down and say, so what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, that's a huge question, and it's an unfair question. It's better if you take this self-exploration process, have them think discreetly about all four of their different domains, have them make tiny decisions about which is more important, wealth or helping people, fast-paced or time for family, to be known or independence, and so it's easier to make those little decisions, which then you can then pull together. And what happens with our system is an algorithm pulls all that together and finds their top 100 jobs for the exploration. But we'll go through that in a little bit. So the next thing that we want to look at is the personality. So we've looked at abilities, interests, and values. Now we're thinking about personality. And for this, we use the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Now, there are free Jungian type indicator tests out there. This is one that you can have. And so if you were to go and take this, it would give you your Myers-Briggs type. Now, Myers-Briggs, if you're not familiar, I'm sure most of you are, but just to refresh your memory, there are 4 categories, and they're each identified by a letter. And the first letter is where you focus your attention. So are you extroverted and focus your attention outward in the world around you? Or are you more introverted and you think thoughts internally and you need to recharge by spending time alone, as opposed to the extrovert who gets their energies by being around other people? So first slice is introverted or extroverted. Then the next one is how you take in information. The S's like to see, feel, and touch everything. They like the here and now. They really like being in the moment with all the things around them. That's how they know it's true. The N's are more futuristic in their thinking. They're less concerned with what it is now and more about the possibilities in the future. So they're kind of big picture versus the here and now. And then we have how you make decisions. The thinkers make decisions by being logical. They think logically, if this is the case, then this should be what I do next. The feelers don't think as much about logic, but more about how that decision might affect other people. They're more sensitive to those around them, and they're more values driven than logic driven. And then we have how do they deal with the world. The J's are the super planners. They love to make lists and check them off. They like to know what they're going to do today and next week. And when they go on vacation, they like to plan it out so they know what's going to happen when they're there. The P's are far more spontaneous. They like to have things just evolve. They like to kind of wake up in the morning and be excited about what the possibilities are rather than necessarily following a plan. They like to tinker with things. They're not as interested in crossing things off a list as much as they might be interested in seeing what would happen if they did this to it too. So they're far more willing to play and tinker. Now, with career counseling, it's really the middle 2 letters that make the most impact on career decisions. So if we look, we see that the STs, so those are the here and now people who make decisions that are logical. Well, these are bankers. These are business people. These are law enforcement and military. This is here and now. We got a problem, and the logical thing to do is X, so we're going to do it. The SFs are the here and now feelers. They're the ones that are sensitive. So they like the here and now. They like the healthcare is great for them because it's here and now, and they're helping people. Religious services. Teachers are frequently, well, teachers are Fs, basically. Teachers are both SFs and NFs. But teachers more are, until you get to academia, and then the NTs are more the academicians at higher education. But the secondary and below teachers are more of the feelers. The NFs are your classic artists. They're the big picture. They see the big picture. They're interested in the possibilities, and they're sensitive to what's going on around them. They're not driven by logic. So these are your artists, and they're your writers, and but they're the classic artist profile. And then the NTs, these people are very logical, big picture oriented. So they are great architects and engineers and entrepreneurs because they see a possibility and they have logic that will drive them to their ultimate goal. They're also good in research. The Ts are good in research, actually. So this helps a student, if they know what they are, they can kind of think about how their personality might mesh with these different career buckets, containers, fields, if you will. So now we've gathered information on all four of these spheres, and now we're looking for the right careers. Now, in the Greenwood system, we take all that information and we find their top 100. But if you were to go do this, you would be doing it on My Next Move or O.Net, and you'd be going and looking up maybe their Holland code and thinking about the personality and thinking about the abilities and so forth to kind of find what you're looking for. Now, this student in their top job family category has this investment and financial management. And we see that there are different opportunities at different educational levels. And so if they were just to go for their associates, they could be a sales agent for financial services. They could get some certificates, pass some courses, and be a sales agent for a financial service. Now, if they wanted to go to school and get a bachelor's in finance or accounting, they might become a personal financial advisor or, branch manager or a stockbroker. And then if they're willing to get an MBA and go on for additional training, they might become an investment fund manager. So you can see how the different educational options provide different opportunities. And so that's another thing that we want the students to think about as, they say they want to be an investment fund manager, and then they'd see through this experiment, through this work, that that's going to require a master's degree or above, and that they should get used to that idea and prepare for the long term. So as I was saying, My Next Move is a great place. O.Net online is another great place for information about these careers. Here's a few more. Career One Stop. My Next Move is great because it has videos about each job, 90-second videos, and they get all those videos from Career One Stop. So if you ever don't see a video in My Next Move, you can usually find it in Career One Stop. And there's Occupational Outlook Handbook, there's the National Career Development Association, and so forth. So those are great sources of information, as are the professional organizations. So if your student decides that they want this, that, or the other career, one of the great sources of information is whatever professional association is out there, because they will actually have information for students who are pursuing that as a career. And like the actuary, they actually have summer camps that they promote. For free, you can go take college level courses in actuary on certain college campuses, and they hope that you'll then go to that school for their actuarial sciences. So that's just an example of how professional organization is a good source for information about different career options. So we've got a lot of options and we need to narrow them down. So with the Greenwood system, again, they've got 100, they're learning about those, they're highlighting the ones that are of interest. Without that, they're going to O.Net, they're looking at careers that share their Holland code. And I may not have mentioned that every job has a Holland code too. So you have a Holland code and jobs have a Holland code. And so you can do a match that way, looking for good matches and then looking at the other things. We try and get them to pick their top 10 and we put on their career exploration worksheet those things that they said were essential. So this student had time for family and helping people and respect and promotion. And so we want, again, for them to think about these things that they said were so important once they fill in their career exploration worksheet. So we're looking at, what is the education required? What is the Holland code for that job? What would I study? What would I have to take? Or what courses would I have to take? Or what degree of education would I need? Then the outlook for the jobs and how much you make at each of these jobs. And all that information can be found at, My Next Move. And then they're thinking about, does this job satisfy those things that I said were my top 5 career values? And only after all that work is done will you ask them to sort and pick their 1, 2, and 3. So you can see this process takes time. It starts with them thinking about their values, it's their interests, their personality, their abilities. Then they're looking at a lot of careers. They're learning a lot about those careers. They're narrowing those careers. They're thinking about those careers in relation to their values. They're doing all of this, and each step of the way they're making smaller and little decisions which are pushing them one way or another until they get to this point where they've got all the ones that they're really interested in, and then they really think about it deeply, and then they're able to identify their first, second, and third options. At that point, the next thing they need to do is learn more. I mean, this helps them focus, but to truly be successful, they're going to need to really learn a lot more. Just reading and watching a 90-second video and seeing what courses you need to take is great to help them narrow, but to learn more, we encourage 3 things. We encourage them to do informational interviews. Go out and talk to the people who do that job. Learn from them firsthand what it's like. Ask them questions, how they got there and what's valued and what do they like about their job and what would they change and what do employers look for. So they're learning firsthand about the job by talking to people in that job. And we've narrowed it down to 3. So we're not sending them out and say, talk to 30 people. We're saying, hey, look, you were interested in these 3 things. Go talk to these three individuals, or maybe multiples if you have access to them. And this is where you as parents can really help, because you have friends and you have friends who have friends. And so, you may know an actuary. So have them talk to them and learn more about it. The next thing that we want them to do is have some experience. Go volunteer, intern, hang out, get a job in that area. But what we're doing is we want them to actually breathe, live, and be that person, or at least in the same space and air. And I tell my students, it doesn't matter if you're delivering coffee or making Xerox copies, you're still there. You're seeing what they wear, you're seeing how they interact with each other, you're observing what they're doing during the day, and you're feeling whether this feels right or it may not. And this is why they need to learn more. And then get some training, get some education. And now education and training is a whole new world. And we'll talk about that in a second, but there are incredible educational opportunities that are free and online, that are really 0 barrier to entry for them to take a course in whatever it is that they're interested in. Everything from fashion and design to computer science to actuarial science to animal breeding. This morning I was directing a student towards an animal breeding MOOC, which is a free online course, because that was of interest to him. And so there are just lots of opportunities. So these three things: we want them to talk to people, we want them to have experiences that inform their decisions, and we also want them to seek out training so they can decide and feel if they feel like they like the other kids in the courses, whether they like the material that they're dealing with, whether they like the professors that are teaching them, and so forth. So you're going to build an action plan. And this is where you're focusing on those top three things. And there are lots and lots of resources. Here's some, not the least of which is YouTube and TED. If you type in a day in the life of air traffic controller, there's this fantastic 20-minute, 10-minute video of a guy who is walking around showing you what he's doing all day and talking about his life and how he got into it, and you know, how he interacts with other people, wearing a uniform, traveling a lot. So those are just great things for students to look at. One that I just realized that isn't on here, but is another excellent source, is Road Trip Nation, where they have students going around the nation, talking to people in different industries, and finding out more about what it's like to be there. Thank you, Amber. She just put Road Trip Nation on the Zoom chat. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about were these MOOCs, massive online open courses. If you're not familiar with these, please avail yourself of it, both for your child and for yourself. There are two big ones out there. There are many MOOCs, but edX and Coursera are the two biggest ones, and the ones that I found that have the reliably most courses of highest value. And these courses are being taught by professors at Harvard and Yale and Duke and Penn and IBM and YouTube. They are absolutely phenomenal, high quality courses that are free. So if you just want to watch some lectures on genetics, sign up, log in, and watch these world-renowned professors talking about their course of study and giving you instruction on whatever it is. Everything, I mean, one of the more popular ones is video game design. A lot of kids say they want to be a video game designer. Well, this course actually talks about all the different components of video game design. You've got the creatives, you've got the programmers, you've got the voice talent, and you've got the storytellers, and all these different people are coming together to put this together, and they actually have a whole course on it. And there are also these things called micro majors and micro masters, and they are actually like 6 and 8 courses that you can take, and for like $1,200, if you take all 6 courses, you get a certificate. And these certificates now have value in the workplace. People use these to get jobs because they have value. If you were to actually take the course and pay for it, it's usually like $100, and you get a certificate saying you actually took the course. I've actually never paid for a course because I don't need the certificates, but I want the information. So I go in and I take courses and I watch and listen, and I get great information, but I don't need the certificate necessarily. I also don't have to take the quizzes and do the exercises, and you have to do those if you want the certificates. So just want to put in a huge plug for massive online open courses, edX and Coursera. Anything you want to learn, you can go there and be taught by the best in the field. So this career exploration really has its advantages. It has, you know, through that self-exploration process, the students know more about themselves. They've articulated their identity. They've thought about what's important. They've come up with purpose and passion synthesis statements. They know more about careers because they've done the research on different careers. They're not just picking a career out of a hat because mom and dad do it, or their favorite uncle does it, but they're actually learning about all the other careers and that one, and then they're making a more informed decision. So they know what careers they want and why they want them, because they can tell you, here's my values, and this satisfies those values. And this is a lifestyle I want to lead, and I can do that with this income. It also helps them choose their major or whatever education they want. Back to the how do you make the decision about all those different options? Well, when you know where you're headed, it's a lot easier to reverse engineer that. One of Covey's, habits is always plan with the end in mind. Well, here we've got an end, or at least a direction in mind, and we're able to plan more accurately, more focused, in a focused way. And that allows them to basically tell the colleges why they want to go there. If they have done this work in sophomore year and they have those experiences and they have been taking courses, they have an application that makes sense and tells a story. They have a really interesting story to tell. They're more likely to do well because honestly, they know why they're there. They're more likely to finish on time because they're not switching their majors and transferring colleges, and they're more likely to get internships. And they're going to get internships because they know what internships they want. A lot of the problem with getting internships is some kids don't know what they're interested in, and then they don't get an internship. Well, we know that internships lead to careers out of college. Kids who have internships in college have more experience. They are much more viable as a career seeker, as a job seeker, than someone who is coming out without that internship knowledge. So let's go back to our original, and here we have the careers, and we know where they're going, and we've got all these different transitions in the middle. And now let's attend to the actual transition to those high school things. So let's attend to, we figured out that they're going to go to X, Y, or Z educational opportunity to pursue A, B, and C career type. Now let's talk about the actual transition that we're going to help them accomplish. Now for this, we're going to use Schlossberg, and she has a book called Overwhelmed, and this is an excellent book that I will be referring to here and would recommend to you, and I'll tell you why as we go through it. But Schlossberg has 3 types of transitions that she focuses on. There is the anticipated transition. These are the transitions that everyone knows are coming, and when they happen, they're celebrated, and all is good in the world. There is the unanticipated transition. This is when tragedy strikes or illness and something unexpected happens. That too is a transition and has its own challenges. And then a third type of transition is the transition that doesn't happen. The one that is expected but hasn't happened yet or doesn't happen. And there is a particular way that you can help students who are stuck in that non-event transition. So I like her theoretical framework because it includes these 3 types, and you can think about them as 3 different transitions. And then within each of those transitions, she has what she calls the 4 S's. Again, this is a framework that you use to understand the student and what they're going through and help them through this transition. And this also works for adults who are getting married or moving or having any kind of life change, empty nesting. These are all transitions. And so one of the things, the first thing that she says is think about the situation. What is the transition? Why is this transition happening? Does the student have control over it? What is the role change? So right now, your student is a high schooler, son or daughter of parents. They go to college, there's a huge role change. Now they're an emerging young adult, they're independent, and they're a college student, not a high school student. And you have to think about these as stressors versus coping ability. So what is their ability to handle this situation, and do they have the coping abilities to be successful in it? So you're looking at that balance as in the situation. You're also looking at what she calls the self. Who is this happening to? What is their mental, physical, situation? Are they optimists? Do they believe that this is happening to them, or are they creating the situation? And then any other demographic factors about them. Then there's the support. Who is there to support them? Do they have institutional support? Do they have friends and families and counselors and mentors? And how are they perceiving that support? Sometimes that support can be perceived negatively or positively or neutral. So we're thinking about what supports they have available to them. And then lastly, the strategies. And this is hugely important. What strategies do they have? Have they done this before? And the more strategies they have available to them, and the more flexibly they're able to employ those strategies, the more likely to be successful they are. And this is where I'm going to give a plug for the book. Dr. Schlossberg gives lots of great strategies for dealing with change. And so, again, helping understand what strategies are and how they might be employed is absolutely a great thing for your students to have. And this is also where I'll give a plug for having your students overcome obstacles in high school is going to better prepare them for overcoming obstacles in the future. So I am always an advocate of you transitioning from the managerial role that you had when you were driving your kid everywhere and you were setting up play dates and you were managing their life, to the advisory role where you are their advisor and they are coming to you for advice. And the more you can transition to that advisory role, the more successful they're going to be in college, because first of all, they've established that you're a good source of information and advice, but you're letting them practice those decision-making skills that they're going to have to do in college without you being right there. So I'm a big advocate for transitioning from that manager to that advisor. And the more successful you're able to do that, again, the better, more stable and resilient your child is going to be as they face the world beyond the safety of the home and the school that they know so well. So this is how we really advocate that you help students transition from their comfortable existence that they've gotten used to. First, think about who they are, think about those 4 S's, and then help them envision where they're going, what's their longer term goal, and then that map in the middle makes a lot more sense, and it makes more sense to them. And they're also more invested in it if they know that's why they're going there. You know, there's 40% of students who go to college don't finish in 6 years. And it's a lot of them are dropping out because they don't see the relevance. It's hard, and they don't see the relevance to what they're doing, or what they don't know what they're doing. So it feels futile. If you can have them know where they're going and they understand that they've got to do this to get to something that they are excited about, that's what the ideal is. But it takes you taking that time to help them figure out exactly what that is, to know how to get there. And then we're thinking about the 4 S's to make sure that they're successful in that transition. Now, if any of this is interesting to you and you want to know more, I do a podcast and we save it on our Video Vault. And I've done a whole lecture on John Holland. So the Holland Code, if you wanted to learn more about those 6 types of people and how John Holland came up with his theories and how he actualized them, there is a video that you can watch that I've done for my counselors when I train my counselors, and periodically I release new information. Schlossberg, there's another, if you want to learn more about Schlossberg, there's another whole video that you can watch. And I go into a lot more detail and depth about all those strategies that I was making reference to, and give a little more meat on the bones to the 4S's. So if you're interested in that. Another one I'll direct you to is the internet resources. This is what kind of a summation of all the resources that we use as career counselors. This is actually me teaching my other career counselors, the people who use the Greenwood system, where I find all of my information. And you can hear their comments about where they find their information. These all come from GS counselor conversations where we get together and collaborate. Mindset is also there. So Dr. Dweck's work with mindset growth and fixed mindsets is another one you can watch. Dr. Duckworth does grit, which I would highly recommend that you watch. And she is particularly an advocate of students developing an interest and having that interest turn into a passion. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify that interest, give them the experience so that they turn it into a passion. And then Dr. Savickas is doing some cutting edge work on life design, which we talked about in another one. So I will direct you to those resources if you are interested in more information. And if you are interested in contacting us directly, here's our contact information, and we would be happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions now, the Q&A is wide open, and the Zoom chat window is open. But
I actually have some follow-up questions.
Okay.
So thank you so much for sharing your insight with us and your discoveries with us. I really appreciate that. I want to address the elephant in the room. And while a lot of this seems very achievable from the comfort of your home, the internship section feels really unsurmountable right now. How do you see that being addressed in the changing workplace landscape?
That is just going to be something very different. We know that the workplace landscape is going to change based upon the experience that we've all had. The companies are figuring out that there's a lot of commercial real estate that they've been paying a lot of money for, and they're finding that their employees are 80 to 85% as effective at home without having to drive, park, and work, together. And so I think the workplace is going to be very different, and that internship is going to be something that we're all going to need to kind of have to figure out, because it's not going to be like the old days. We're not going to go back to the way in which we worked before. So it is an elephant in the room, and I just have ideas that it's going to be different, but I don't have a crystal ball, and no one does, to know exactly how different it's going to be. But we just really do need to encourage our kids to get out, and we all have friends. We all have people that we know. We have aunts and uncles and neighbors and close friends and high school buddies that do a lot of things. And everyone loves to help people, especially high schoolers that are looking for what to do. So there's a lot of people out there that would be more than happy to have your kids shadow them for a day or sit down for a 1-hour interview. And while they're doing that structured interview, they're kind of they're not there to get the internship, but they're certainly saying, gosh, this seems really interesting. How can I help? And a lot of organizations have events that they need help with, free labor, that they can come and hand t-shirts out or work a booth or hand out water. But just how is it that they can get in there? Because that's what it takes. My son graduated from college last year. Well, for the last year, he volunteered on a research team. He built their website. He hung out there and just did whatever odd job they wanted him to do. And when he graduated, they hired him. And that's what it takes to beat out the next guy. And that's what internships are. And that wasn't even a formal internship. he was just volunteering. He was just taking his free time and hanging out with a lot of people, and they got to know him. They knew what he could do, and then he already knew what to do on day one of the job. So that's going to be really important. And I think that it's going to be different in the future, Amber. I think you're absolutely right. How it's going to be different, I don't know. I think it's going to be harder. But we're all going to have to just remember how important that is.
I think you bring up a really excellent point about volunteering. I noticed at the beginning of April, which is traditionally the national time to volunteer, there were a lot of digital volunteer opportunities. I think 100,000 were on the volunteermatch.com. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a really great way for students to still get engaged and demonstrate their interest in a subject. So thank you for bringing that back up. I wanted to ask you about reaching out to those types of people. If you don't have a direct family contact or an easy access point, what can we recommend for students to try and do to maybe cold reach out to people?
Yeah. Human resource departments are good places to start. So if a larger organization has an HR department, those people are really good at giving information about what it's like to work there. So you may not be able to talk to the lawyer, but maybe you can talk to their HR department, who could then tell you about what it's like to be in contract law, or what it's like to be in litigation, or family law. Or what it's like to be a paralegal, or what it's like to be a paralegal assistant. Those are good places to cold call. And again, I'll go back to the professional organizations. I send my students to the conferences of professional organizations. They buy student passes and they go and they sit in on lectures. And sometimes there's a whole student track that they have created for people to go do. So, one time I was with a kid in the actuarial sciences, was having their convention in Salt Lake that week. And he signed up, went, and came back just a whole world more knowledgeable about what it was like to be an actuary. And he got to see what they were talking about and who they were and what they were like. So that's what you want. You want them to experience that, because that's going to give them the confidence to be like, boy, that was really neat. I really like that. Or, man, that was weird. I could never do that. And either way, it helps them make better decisions with more information.
That's an excellent recommendation. Thank you for bringing that up. I want to take a step back and talk about transitioning from high school into college, and where this work comes into play with not only selecting a career, but really helping choose the right college for a student, because that can be a very crucial and painful step. What can you offer as guidance for that?
Yeah, again, I think that a lot of us go about choosing colleges in a very backward way. We like very much to start at the end, because if you're going to be an architect, not every school has an architecture school. Not every school has an education department. And you don't want to find yourself in your sophomore year wanting architecture and having to switch colleges to obtain that, or having that be the hurdle that you have to overcome to realize that goal. So that's where we're really wanting them to focus their attention. And then, then you can really specialize. Then you can really say, boy, Carnegie Mellon's got an excellent engineering department. Man, oh man, you want to be an engineer, that is the place to be. MIT and, and Carnegie Mellon, and, you can then be more targeted. And just really, it makes more sense. And if they've had all these experiences, if they've built all these things, if they've had these internships, if they've volunteered, and their essays are full of interesting things they've done in the world of whatever it is that they're interested in doing, then that just makes all the sense in the world. Before all this, my wife was working with a student and they came up with epidemiologist. Well, the University of Oregon has a great epidemiology undergraduate program which feeds directly into their graduate program in epidemiology. Well, that was it. That made the decision. She, that was how she made her decision. Now, it was one of a couple different schools, but once she identified epidemiology, it was a no-brainer. So that's what we're looking for.
That's great. That's exactly how these processes should help, hopefully.
Yeah.
I do have a final question. I'm hoping you can share an anecdote with us about a student or family that came to you with one expectation and left with something totally different. How have you experienced that?
Yeah. So that is a really good question. And I'll tell you how we work with clients. And so I'll use this one student. It was a student who comes from a very high-powered family, lots of lawyers and doctors in the family. And he was really floundering in this family because everyone was hugely successful and he wasn't. And he really hadn't found his place. But in going through and finding out what's important to him and really digging into his being, we realized he's a very creative kid, and he really likes to be on his feet and moving and active. And we came up with chef. And this is something that had never occurred to him. Now, he was in a program, and the program were like, we did this exercise on making eggs, and he really enjoyed it. So he actually ended up getting his food handler's license and making breakfast 5 days a week for the whole house. And then we met with his parents, and his parents were like, huh. They could see how that was a really good fit, and they could see how excited he was about that. And it was still, this idea of being a celebrity chef was still out there. It still had prestige. And, if you go about it, and not short order cook, but, I want to be a fine, I want to own a restaurant and I want to run a kitchen. And, so it really gave him an avenue that he was really struggling with because he just couldn't see himself being the doctor and lawyer as everyone else was. And everyone just celebrated without having ever thought of that as an option for him. So he ended up going off and getting, his chef. He went to oh gosh, it's the one, Johnson and Wales, where they do a reverse. They have them work for 2 years and really learn how to do it. And then the last 2 years is when they take all their gen eds and all of their coursework. So they let them kind of grow up a little bit, incubate a little bit longer. And that was a good thing for him. He needed that time to really get involved and be celebrated for who he was and grow up a little bit more so that he could get the English 101 and the finite math and the other things that he needed for his bachelor's degree.
That's really fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
We started this conversation out. I mentioned Bridges Academy, and so I want to end this with a question about how it looks for a gifted student to go through this process. I imagine gifted students have an overwhelming abundance of options and what their life could look like, and narrowing that down to something specific. Have you noticed a big difference between a gifted kid and maybe a more traditional student?
Absolutely. It can be the curse of being so good at everything that all doors and all options are open to you. And that is equally as paralyzing to some kids as not being capable, because they just don't know. And that's where we have to think holistically. What kind of life do you want to lead? What's important to you? How do you want to contribute? What do you want to, what are your 3 wishes? What all these things, and then it becomes more clear. But it's very much a process of narrowing. And then, there are, with our system, we know 200 dimensions of every job. We know what cognitive capabilities you need to have for each job, which physical capabilities, what the work is like, what the work context, what values those people have, what their personalities are. So we can actually sort based on exceptional strengths. If we've got a kid who has an exceptionally creative mind, then we can leverage originality, and we can look at his 100 jobs or her 100 jobs and say, this is an exceptionally creative and innovative student. And and those things sort to the top. And likewise, sometimes students have deficits, and we can also think about those, and we can put them in, and it can depress jobs for which that is most very important, and they would struggle because they don't have that skill. So we are very much about strength based. So we're looking at how can we leverage the strength of that student in the workplace, in a career that they are excited about because it checks all the boxes. But first of all, we got to figure out what those boxes are, and that's what we do.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate your being here and again having your voice in this conversation. I do want to mention briefly that you are joining our summer program, which was originally Explore, which is being retooled to be digital online. So hopefully we'll get to see you again in that capacity. And for the audience out there, thank you for joining tonight. I do have an event, anticipated event coming up where I want to engage with parents and have an open forum and discussion to talk about what the gifted support group can look like moving forward. There's not a date for that yet, so there'll be some follow-up information about what that will look like and when that will be held. But I'd love to have you participate and join and add your voice and talk about what this group can bring to the table for those of you who show up here. So thank you again for being here this evening. Thank you, audience, for showing up tonight. I hope everyone